Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Jeremy Butler. I'm the Senior Military Fellow at Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. I'm honored and excited to be here representing our organization and our 450,000 veteran and civilian members from around the country. IAVA, as we're known, has been a longtime supporter of Joe Pascal and the Hudson Union, and we've supported these type of events a number of times. It's usually our CEO, Paul Rakoff, who gets to do it, and the next day he comes back and tells me what an amazing event it is and how great it was, and I always have to hear his story. So I was very excited this morning when he had something pop up and couldn't make it, so I got to be here in his stead. So I'm pleased to be here. Also like to make a quick big thank you to Jay Billington, John Manley, and Kirsten Allman for helping to make this evening a reality. Very briefly, if I may, I'd like to tell you a quick bit about IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. We're headquartered here in New York City, and our mission is to connect, unite, and empower post 9/11 generation of veterans. And we do this primarily through two different ways. We do a lot of legislative advocacy down in DC and at the local levels around the country. And then also, on the other hand, we have a much more in-depth program called a Rapid Response Referral Program, where we have a group of master's level social workers whose sole job is to work directly with veterans and their family members to connect them to services that they need. And that can be anything from as simple as trying to access their GI Bill benefits to something much more complex like medical care that they didn't get when they were in the military and dealing with any sort of PTSD, TBI, those types of issues. It's a long distance relationship they have. You don't need to make appointments. We talk to them over the phone, email, internet. There's no appointments necessary, so it's a very easy and free access that they have. And it really does bring life-changing resources to these veterans. And so I said that I'm excited and honored to be here, not just because of the guest that we have with us tonight, and not just because of what he's done in the military, but really what he's done sort of outside of that, because it directly connects to what IAVA does. And his actions and the words that he's spoken really have made it easier for us to accomplish our mission, which is to make things better for the post 9/11 generation of veterans. And I'll explain a little bit what I mean about that, but first I'd like to talk a little bit about the General's background, and I will be very brief in that I was told to make my remarks a little brief, so I'm going to try and do this quickly. But he was commissioned in 1989 as an officer in the U.S. Army, multiple command tours, HHC 5th Special Forces Group Airborne, Charlie Company 2nd Battalion 5th Special Forces Group Airborne, 1st Battalion 3rd Special Forces Group in Afghanistan, Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force Afghanistan, Combined Forces Special Operations Component Command Afghanistan, and most recently is Theater Special Operations Command in Africa. If you're not in the military, that may have gone right over the heads of you a little bit. I got 17 years in the Navy, and that is incredibly impressive. But what's also unsaid beyond all that is that in all that time, and even times before, no fewer than 6 combat deployments to Afghanistan, 2 to Kuwait, and 1 to Iraq. And along with those, he was just telling us some stories about some incredibly harrowing events that he's been through. I won't dwell on those. I imagine we may get into some of them here a little bit tonight. But that quick summary of his impressive career does not even begin to cover everything that he's done and accomplished. Now that said, I said I wanted to make a connection to IAVA, and what really first brought General Bolduc to my attention was when he appeared in a New York Times article in October of last year. I had just started working at IAVA a little bit before that, and the title of the article was "A General's New Mission, Leading a Charge Against PTSD, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder." And in this article, he spoke about his own realization that he was suffering from some of the effects of PTSD, and was very open about his realization, how long it took him to realize that, and what he needed to do to seek care and to get better. And then beyond that, it recounted a story where he stood in front of the service members that were under his command when he was stationed in Germany, and was very upfront with them about, I'm in counseling, I'm seeking help, this is the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do for any service member, and things like PTSD shouldn't be seen as an invisible wound. It should be seen as just the same thing as a broken arm, any other sort of outward-facing injury. And that was sort of maybe just the beginning of what he has been doing ever since then, which is pushing that message out to everyone within the Department of Defense, within the military, and trying as hard as possible to make people aware at all levels that this is a very big issue within the military, and it needs to not only be confronted at the highest levels of the DoD and the VA, but down to the individual sailors, Marines, soldiers, and airmen, so that they understand that if they're suffering from any of these issues, they need to be upfront about it and they need to seek care. Now, this article really blew me away, not just because it was a high-ranking general speaking about this, but because it was a warrior such that the general is that was speaking about this. It really brought it home to me, and was something that we took back and we actually talked a lot about within our staff meetings at IAVA, within the social workers that do the work that they do in the Rapid Response Referral Program, and it's something that we've referred back to quite a number of times as an example of what needs to be done. So it's an honor for me to be here. I won't continue on any longer. I will take now time to turn this over to Joe Pascal. He's interviewed 1,500 plus incredible individuals in this time, so I'm really looking forward to this discussion and what we're going to learn. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Pascal and Brigadier General Donald Bolduc.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for that great speech. To kickstart it, you're known as this great warrior. I'd just like to understand this person, the great warrior, and understand your command. Presently, you have over 28 countries. You have, as commander of Africa, you have 28 countries, but there's European countries that are a part underneath your command. We're talking UK, Belgium, France, Poland. Why are these European countries also underneath the commander of Africa's command?
Well, I think it gets back to the geography of Africa and how it's affected the migration of foreign fighters into the Levant and into the Middle East and across the Mediterranean into Europe, and the things that they've done there. And we've seen that most recently, but it's been going on for a while. So France considers Mali a front line, and other European countries consider North Africa the front line. And they're seeing the impacts of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the associates, and the affiliates inside North Africa, West Africa, across the Sahel, into Lake Chad Basin, Central Africa, and across in the east, as all connected. The routes of illicit trafficking, criminal activity, terrorist activity, the way they move supplies, it all runs on old historic routes that come from Central and South America into the West and gets funneled out from there and serves to resupply and provide the monetary support and the material support to a lot of the groups. And then of course you have that occurring in the east, and you have it coming down through Yemen, you have it going up through Sudan and into the greater Levant. So Africa sits at the crossroads of violent extremism, and they're now seeking safe haven and have seek safe haven inside Africa, and there's a call to unite, there's a call to do more things against U.S. interests and our coalition partners and our allies, and more importantly, our African partners.
You were one of the first people into Afghanistan after 9/11. You went over with your team after the president gave the order. Walk me through what it was like when you first stepped onto Afghan soil, and to what happens to you and some members of your team on December 5th, 2001.
So this is quite interesting, actually, as far as I'm concerned, because we didn't know what to expect. We did all our planning in Uzbekistan, and we flew to Jacobabad, Pakistan, via MC-130s, landed, transloaded spent a couple days there because the weather was bad, so we had a little bit more planning time, but this was a very compressed timeline. And we really had no information on who we were supposed to meet on the ground. We were only going to a location in Tarankout, Afghanistan, which is in the Oregon province, in southern Afghanistan. And we didn't know who we were going to link up with, we didn't know what we were going to find. It was going to be dark, and we got on the back of, MH-53s and flew in there. On our way in, one of them got shot. We thought we were going to have to turn around, but the pilots made an assessment. We continued in. We had a pretty significant hard landing. It was extremely dark. There was no moon out, and night vision goggles. So we get on the ground, we go out. We were a small team. My battalion commander was with us. He looks at me and he goes, "Now what are we going to do, Don?" And I said, "Well, sir, we're going to sit here and we're going to wait until we see people moving towards us." And he goes, "All right, that sounds like a good plan." So we stayed there and we started seeing silhouettes of folks, and we didn't have any idea what these silhouettes were. Now they realized that aircraft had landed. They came towards that aircraft. The aircraft had since left. The dust had settled. We started seeing the silhouettes of folks that coming towards us, and we made introductions. We had one guy on the team that spoke Pashto, thank goodness. He made the introductions, and he said, "Okay, everything's good." We moved out, and they brought us to Hamid Karzai. And from there, we began to plan the southern campaign from Tarankout down to Kandahar, which was the operational objective.
But you're riding on horseback. How do you get to Kandahar? It's incredible. You ride on horseback. You do it all different types of transport. Tell the story.
Right. So we got horses, we got mules. Initially we're on foot, and it wasn't until Hamid Karzai had put the call out to the village elders. "Hey, we're here to help. We need you to come in. We want to talk to you." And that's when pickup trucks started showing up, right? And a lot of these folks were on the other side 2 days ago, and now they've switched sides, which was something that we had to get used to, right? Very cultural thing, but something that was very interesting. And so they would come, "Yeah, we're on your side now. You guys are the strongest, and we're going to stay with you." And we're like, "Okay, great." And as we started building our team from nothing to 50 to 75 to 100, as we continued to move south, and Karzai was conducting all his village elder and tribal elder meetings, and more people were coming. And you could tell these guys were very experienced with trying to avoid our ISR. What they would do is they would mud pack their vehicles, the outside of the vehicles with mud, because that brought down the heat signature. And so you see all these vehicles covered with mud coming into your location, and you knew they were against you the day before, but now they're with you somehow, right? And certainly not the American way of war, but we began to embrace it. I don't think it's anything that my battalion commander got comfortable with. And as we got closer to, we're in Shawali Khat, about 12 miles from Kandahar, getting ready to do our last push.
Which is the center for the Taliban.
Right.
That's the heart, right?
The heart and soul, because Kandahar is a religious center of gravity, and that's where they set themselves
And
up.
how far from where you landed to Kandahar? How many miles?
Well, I think it's probably about maybe 150 kilometers or so, but it's through terrain that there's no road, right? And very tough terrain.
So you land on, basically, you come in through night, one of the first people on Afghan soil. This is October 7th, and then what happens December 5th as you and others are opening, your troops are opening up mail and other stuff, right?
Right, okay, so this is fascinating. So we're in 3 days of firefights, 3 continuous days of firefights. Nothing but firefights for 3 days. We're fighting in orange groves, we're fighting in grape orchards, and this is like, if you've ever fought in those things, they're very high berms, and they're very difficult to fight through and fight over. It's similar to hedgerows, but they're not hedgerows, right, that we saw in World War II that we hear about. And these things were very, very difficult. And the way the enemy would fight was it would get you, they would try and roll you up inside the grape orchards in the lanes between the mounds of dirt, right? And so this was very difficult. We had one guy shot, we had to medevac him out. We're constantly pushing the fight. Well, during this time, people are trading sides. So on the third night, we hear that there's going to be a large number of guys coming over. And I'm like, all right. The sun comes up, lo and behold, we got nearly 1,500 people out there on our side. One of them comes up and says, the guy that I nicknamed Elvis, he was a hard worker and he would go out and get everything done for us. But the reason I called him Elvis was he only knew one phrase in English, and that was, "Thank you very much." and I don't know who taught him that, but it was precious. And so I'd say, "Go get Elvis." And he started calling himself Elvis. And so, it was great. So he would come up and I would say, "Where's Elvis?" And Elvis would come in and we'd get some interpretation going and Elvis would go out and get stuff done. And everything I said to him, it was, "Thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much." It didn't matter what it was, right? So, he was a great guy. But anyways, Elvis comes up to me and, I look at him and I go, "Wow, where'd all these people come from?" "Thank you very much," because he doesn't know what I'm saying. And I go to my battalion commander and I go, "Hey, sir, we got all these guys out here." And he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this," right? And we had weapons dropped in and other stuff. So we started issuing out weapons, started training them on the stuff, getting them ready to go because we want to do that final push. And we had a low in the small arms fighting, right? And we had a lot of intel that came over. And so we put together, we sat with Hamid Karzai and we put together a close air support campaign where these guys were telling us the bad guys were, and the village elders were verifying that. And we didn't drop one bomb unless Hamid Karzai and the village elders said, "Drop the bomb," right? And so we got Hamid Karzai and the village elders. We taught them one word. You want us to do it, you have to say, "Smoke them." And so it was hilarious because the village elders, that's the only word they knew in English, most of them, and it was like, "Smoke them, smoke them," And they big band of guys. So we would send out the ISR, look at it, and there's a bunch of guys there. And they were just amazed at being able to watch this, right? Same thing with night vision goggles, right? The way I used to keep the Afghan sentries awake was I let them use my night vision goggles. The first time I did that, I go, "Here," and I hand him the goggles, and I go, "Put them up to your eyes." He puts up the eyes, and he's like, and then he puts it up, and then you couldn't get him away from him. It's like my grandson with a toy, right? You couldn't get it out of his hands, but it kept him awake and it kept him vigilant, right? And so that was one of the ways that we partnered American with them and made sure that they were doing the right thing.
So you have these 1,500 come over, and then December 5th,
right?
It's heartbreaking. What happens?
Heartbreaking. So we get this intel, and we put together the bombing campaign, and Karzai gives us the okay to do it, and we got F-15s and 18s and B-52s just loitering off, coming in, and we're slamming ordnance in broad daylight, right? And in the midst of all this, we got mail for the first time, right? So a couple months there on the ground, mail comes in, and so we distribute the mail, and the guys are opening it up, and they got Oreos and Twinkies and all the things that they like, notes and letters from their wives and loved ones, and pictures of the kids and all this stuff. And so it was great. Morale was high. People were happy. Well, the tragedy struck when, unfortunately, there was an error in the procedures to direct bombs on target. And the error was the changing of the batteries in the laser system that we were using to provide the grid coordinates for the enemy positions. Once you change the batteries, in this particular system, the grid coordinate defaults to center mass of your location. And the individual responsible for that did not double check. And the grid coordinate that he sent up to the B-52 with a 2,000-pound bomb on it was our center mass of our location. And that bomb hit. And we had casualties from center mass all the way out to about 200 meters. And there was no particular pattern in who got hit and who got hurt.
But do you hear this massive 2-ton bomb, 2,000-pound bomb, coming towards you?
I didn't hear a thing.
And what happened to you and what happened to people next to you? What do you see?
Well, let me tell you, it hit the top of our position. So we were occupying high ground in an old Soviet artillery position in Shawali Khat. High ground, command of the grape fields, the apple orchard, great command position for my battalion commander to look and make decisions, see what the heck's going on, that kind of stuff. So it was a great location. And it was already dug out, right? It was a former Soviet artillery position. So we were up there and we had our Afghan partners with us. We shared a hole with them. And what I remember is I didn't hear anything, but when I got up, I wasn't in the same place I was that I remembered being in. And I had blood and pieces of flesh and stuff all over my uniform. And unfortunately, I looked off to my side and saw a very tragic scene of, an American service member that was severely injured. And I won't go into the gory details of that, but suffice it to say that he was one of the 3 that was killed. From there, my training had to kick in. Now I was hurt. I was limping around. I knew my ears were ringing. I was disoriented. I knew my hips were injured, but I didn't know to what extent. And I knew I was limping. But now it was a matter of regaining security, number one, and all of our ammunition was up on top of the mountain. And so what started happening was the RPGs started going off, the rounds started cooking off, the grenades started exploding, and so we had to get people off that mountain quick and secure that area. And we did that, so we had a casualty control point. Then I had to make sure Hamid Karzai wasn't hurt, which he wasn't. And then we had to figure out where we were going to bring helicopters in. Our radios were all blown up, so I had my commo guy running around trying to he was injured too, everyone was injured, but he's trying to put together a radio that we could use to call back. So he finally did that, so we called back, we report what happened. And, we got three dead Americans that we know of. We got other Americans missing arms and legs. We got a number of our Afghan brothers, either killed or severely injured. I told our higher headquarters that we're going to evac these guys out because they're our partners. And there was some pushback at higher levels on that, I don't know why. But we worked through that real carefully. And so at this time at Camp Rhino, who was out at Camp Rhino was General Mattis. He was a 1-star at the time. And he was out at Rhino with his guys. And so he was he made sure that the helicopters coming in, the C-130s that landed there at Rhino to transload our guys was all managed.
So you basically, with this horrible incident, you get 2 hips replaced, some work on your ears. Mm-hmm. Just walk me through. It's incredible. You're known by your troops as the nickname Bionic Man. Just walk through briefly, if you're comfortable, some of these injuries and incidents where they occurred. Crash in a helicopter. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, so obviously, hip injuries, neck injuries, ear injuries, internal concussive injuries to the head that we just didn't know about.
What happened with the helicopter incident?
So the helicopter incident was in 2005. I was battalion commander, and I was directed to provide to be the C2 helicopter for a very large operation that we were doing in the Oregon province because the enemy had massed in a particular area. And our SOF team was part of that. Several of my SOF teams were part of that, and I got named as the commander in charge, and so I had to be in a command and control helicopter. Well, we don't have a lot of helicopters, so there was dual tasks. On that helicopter, I had a split team of SOF guys that once the other guys were inserted, we had a whole plan for this, we were to go down into the location and insert these guys. They get off the helicopter, and we pull up and go back up into our C2 thing. Well, what ended up happening was we're flying into this, and we're coming in fast and hard. We could visibly see the weapons on some of the Afghans. Hard to tell at this point whether they're hostile or not. They're not shooting at us, but nonetheless, the pilots are doing their evasive maneuvers, right? Coming in. And at one point, I realized this isn't going well for us. He doesn't have control of the aircraft, and he just comes in nose first. And I remember, clicking and saying, "Uh-oh, I think this is it." And next thing I know, I come to out on the ground, and the way the guys tell it is, I was unconscious, hanging upside down in the helicopter. They pulled me out, and when I came to, I looked up, I looked around, and I looked at one of the sergeants, and I said, "Sergeant, what do you need me to do?" And the sergeant looks at the team leader and goes, "I'm not used to giving the battalion commander orders." and so Matt right back, the team leader, goes, "Tell the colonel what you need him to do." And he goes, "Sir, take this squad automatic weapon and go pull security at 12 o'clock position." And so, like a private, and I picked up the weapon and I moved out smartly and I pulled security. I don't tell that story. The guys tell it to me. I have barely a memory of even doing all of that, right? But it was clear to me that they knew the situation. I didn't know the situation, and I wasn't going to pretend that I knew the situation. So I was going to follow the orders of the man that was the most informed at the time, and that happened to be a staff sergeant. And so I just did what he told me.
General, with all this incredible combat experience and seeing loss of life and all these situations of being wounded so many times, have you ever thought, it's lights out now for me? It might be lights out now for me.
So every deployment you kind of think might be my last deployment, because things are so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous that you really don't know what's going to happen. And then, of course, as we started moving through, 11, 12, and 13, at one point I had done 23 months in Afghanistan, and that was a long time to be away, right? And I thought, with the insider threats, and the, Afghan soldiers, firing on Americans, and you just don't know when that's going to happen. You could be sitting in a meeting, you could be out at training, you could be conducting an operation with them. It happened all over. And it was, a significant problem. So you didn't know where the threat was going to come from. Surrounded by the enemy, surrounded by the populace. It simplifies things, as a great general in Korea said, Marine general said, I'm surrounded by the enemy, and that simplifies our problem, right? And I thought the same thing, right? And it does simplify it, but it doesn't make it any clearer to you, so you just don't know.
You talked about Karzai. He's known to be very volatile at times. What was your experience with him?
I tell you what, I had a lot of respect for him. That guy, when I met him in Tarankout, he was calm, he was cool, he was collected, he spoke perfect English. He knew he was focused, laser focused on what he needed to do. and that was unite the South and take Kandahar. And he did a lot of negotiations, and it was amazing to watch him. He was negotiating with the members of the Bonn Conference. He was negotiating with heck, Wolf Blitzer called one time into a hut, got Hamid Karzai on the phone. And so he's talking to these guys, and he's managing the village elders and the tribal elders. And he is making military decisions, you know. And that's the position that we put him in order to give him the luster that he needed. So yes, we were enabling, supporting, and it was U.S. ISR, and it was, U.S. planes and so on and so forth. But guess what? What the village elders saw was Hamid Karzai making the decisions in collaboration with them, and that was hugely, hugely powerful. So
you also had.
I got it. Things happened later that were.
But you had a good relationship with him.
I did
during this.
To this day, I do.
Tell me, what does it take to be a member of your Special Forces team, to be chosen? You commander of Special Forces for Africa, 1,700 people underneath you. You've done Special Forces in Afghanistan, Iraq. What does it take to be a member on the Special Forces team?
Well, first of all, it takes kind of a unique individual, because each of these services have their assessment processes, right? And in Special Forces, and to this day, and the song is right, only about 33% make it through. And so, 3 out of 100, right? Or whatever number you want to use. And so, it takes a mature individual with common sense, someone who is professionally educated, knows his job, does his job well, is optimistic, enthusiastic about what he does, physically fit is a huge requirement, and someone who also sees the big picture, can work well with others, either as part of a small team, by himself, and is good at team building. So that's what it takes. And guys go through a selection process in order to ensure that they can work as part of a team just as quickly as they can work by themselves and go back and forth.
So there's no hope for me.
I think you do just fine, sir.
You have been cited as the architect of the village stability operations in Afghanistan. Through the New York Times, through all across literature and military. Why hasn't that worked so well recently?
Because we stopped doing it. If you're not doing it, it's not going to work. This is not criticism. It's just, President Obama decided on a strategy for Afghanistan. They implemented that strategy, and that included removing removing special operation forces from the villages. And that's the essence of village stability operations.
And you think that's the reason why right now over half of Afghanistan supposedly is under Taliban control?
Well, let me characterize it this way. When I left in my last rotation there in mid-June, I was able to walk through the Helmand province, no kit on. Most of the provinces in the west, the Kunduz province, the Kunar province, we still had some, red spots, but they were getting smaller and smaller. The Panjwai district in Kandahar, and all these places were secure, and they were being secured through village stability operations, small soft teams inside select villages, developing Afghan local police in a very traditional way that Afghans have secured themselves throughout their history. Rural areas, Arbakai. Karzai did not want to call it that way. He wanted a formal system. So we assisted him in developing a formal system connected to the government called Afghan Local Police. And they were working very well. And we got a lot of enemy communications, intercepts, and I'm not giving anything away here, it's been out in the news, so it's been reported. RAND has done studies on it. And basically, we have them saying, we don't have an answer for the Americans in the villages and for the Afghan local police. We don't have an answer for it. It is it's the thing that is most dangerous to how we operate, and it prevents us from being effective. And so that's a huge credit to, one, the program, the SOF guys that were doing the program, and the Afghan local police that were securing their villages and connecting that security over a larger area.
Why didn't you capture or kill Ayman al-Zawahiri while you were in Afghanistan?
Wasn't my mission.
But he's falling underneath this large area. He's in pretty much on the border area, supposedly.
Right.
Did you ever think there was a time that you were close to him?
No, not me personally, and not any of my guys. Not any more than we were, close to Osama bin Laden. I mean, those responsibilities for hunting those guys fell to different units conducting different kinds of missions that, when they took out a leader, supported what my soft guys were doing, but not my mission. And I never felt we would get the lower hanging fruit guys, which was good. Sometimes taking those guys out is more effective than taking the leader out, right? Because they're more networked and more closer to. And we would bump into those guys, the Afghan local police would bump into those guys, and we'd take them off the battlefield. But the big HVTs, never thought we got close to them, and certainly not a mission of ours. It fell to somebody else.
In 1991, you're on the ground, the start of Operation Desert Storm. Same exact thing, you're on the ground, the start of liberating Afghanistan. How was it different from your perspective of being on the ground, both operations? What are you seeing? What is different?
Well, what is different is, and I was in 3rd Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group at the time. I wasn't a Special Forces officer at the time. I hadn't gone through the training yet, but nonetheless I was a staff officer there. And in that war, that was a conventional war in which SOF was in support of the convention. In Afghanistan, it is predominantly a Special Operation Force environment in which Special Operation Forces, are on the ground, and areas, a lot of the areas of conventional forces are in support of SOF. So that's the big difference. A non-contiguous environment that requires small teams to operate in remote areas to support a specific mission set that complements the larger operational and strategic plan.
A person that's caused tremendous havoc on the African continent to children and many, Joseph Kony, in Uganda and slipping over the border of other countries. You being commander of Africa for 4 years, why didn't you ever capture or kill him?
So here's the thing. We were given the counter-LRA mission, and part of that mission, President directed and Congress mandated, so it became a law, to capture, kill Joseph Kony. But we weren't given the resources to track down one guy in triple canopy jungle in an area the size of California. So we did the next best thing. We took the 100 soft guys that we had. We developed relationships with the Ugandan People's Defense Force, with the South Sudan special commando unit, the special forces units in the DRC, and we went after the network. And so we started doing patrols. The African Union established the African Union Regional Task Force in South Sudan, and that became a very effective regional task force that ran all those operations, and we enabled and supported, provided advice and assistance And so what we did was, we went after that network, and we kept the pressure on that network continuously, and we took the LRA organization from 3,000 down to less than 100. We took all 5 of Coney's commanders off the battlefield.
Do you think he'll eventually be captured or killed?
I have no idea. What I think probably going to happen is that he's going to die of old age out in the jungle somewhere.
How old is he?
He's old. He's old as dirt. That's what I say. I really don't know.
How many special operations on a daily basis do you execute in Africa?
So in Africa, we're responsible for 96 missions, and there are 886 activities and actions associated with all those missions in 28 countries.
So for somebody simple like me, let's break that down. What does that mean? 96, what does that mean? 96 missions.
Yeah. So in some places, we're training, and all the places we're advising, assisting, and accompanying.
And you call that missions.
Those are missions.
So there's 96,
Yep.
and there's 800, what?
886 actions and activities associated with
With
it.
those missions. And those missions could be from training to taking out Al-Shabaab or some terrorist in Kenya, Somalia, wherever.
That's right.
So on a daily basis, how many operations against violent extremists, active operations besides training, what would you say that you're executing? Is it 20 under your command?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
17 to 20, and it's across that. It's in North Africa, it's in Tunisia. We're supporting Tunisians in the Kasserine Pass. We're in, we're doing Libya, the whole 9 yards.
What concerns you most about Africa and violent extremism?
What concerns me the most is what may happen in about 10 to 15 years if something isn't done to improve governance, socioeconomic development, and develop civil administration at the local level. Because if we think people today are killing each other over violent extremism, you haven't seen anything yet until they start killing each other over no food, no water, and basic survival. And that is very much the way it could trend if things are not done in Africa that need to be done. What exacerbates that is population growth. 41% of the population right now is under 15, and that's going to get higher. By 2050, that's right around the corner. 2050, population in Africa is going to go from 1.2 to 2.4 billion. They have tremendous capacity in the economy, but it's stagnated. And it's stagnated because of ineffective governance and high corruption. And it's exacerbated by extremist organizations conducting operations to disrupt and degrade the government's ability to provide the necessary security and provide the jobs and the education that's needed. And if that doesn't get fixed, Africa is going to be unstable, and it's going to create problems. Remember, most of the foreign fighters come from Tunisia and Morocco into the Middle East, Levant, and Afghanistan. So that's pretty significant. Tremendous safe havens can be taken advantage of inside Africa. Attacks in Europe, Central South America, that whole nexus there. It could be very ugly, and so that's what I think about every day.
Is it possible for Somalia to be stabilized?
Yes,
Why do you say that?
because I think that the current president, Famajo, and if you've read his thesis, which is out there, by the way, on the internet, he's got a different approach to governing in Somalia, and he wants to regionalize the governance, which is the way to go in our opinion. And this is the soft opinion. At least it's, as the former commander, it was my opinion. Now, there's a new commander there, so I'm not going to speak for him. But we think that regionalizing the areas under a federated government is the best way to go, and that's what Famajo wants to do. And so he's going to leverage that type of governance structure instead of a a centralized Somalia and everybody falls up underneath.
Are you concerned with China moving into and influencing a lot of African nations?
It's already being done.
I know.
Russia, China, North Korea, Iran,
Are you
hugely
concerned?
problematic, very concerned, and it's something that we report on, we report on all the time. They are really influencing the strategic relationship, and it's another thing that I worry about 10 to 15 years from now is their ability to influence how African countries think. They're building infrastructure, roads, they're building bridges, they're building airports, they're building all kinds of things. They control the 15 African voting countries in the UN, and that's why we've never been able to pass a resolution in Africa against them, because they just whisper into the area. So it's very dangerous.
My last two questions before a couple of audience questions. How do you define your brand of leadership?
My brand of leadership? So my brand of leadership is mission-focused leadership. So what does that mean? So that means the complete trust and empowerment of my subordinates. We have organized our headquarters to work for the subordinate headquarters, not the other way around. So, picture this. You got the chain of command. Everybody knows I'm the commander. I don't have to tell people I'm the commander on a daily basis. I'm the commander. And we know that has a structure. And there's decisions that are made over there. Set that aside. Let's talk about getting work done and empowering people bottom up to get work done. You have to be flat communications. You have to have decentralized authorities down to the lowest level. I must remain a mile wide and inch deep. If I am going to be effective on that continent as a commander, I cannot try to control things. So the empowerment of my personnel through a mission command construct that is set up through a series of commands that allows my guys to act as fast as the enemy and as fast as our partners on the ground. Trust is a huge thing. Underwriting mistakes. Nobody messes with my guys, right? As long as they don't do anything illegal, immoral, and negligently unsafe, I got their back. The buck stops here, and I've proved that time and time again. I would like to think at least that's what they've told me. They know that they can go out and use creativity, initiative, imagination, be action-oriented, and know that as long as they're doing something, trying to do the right thing, they can make a mistake, understand that mistake, and continue to move forward, and nothing's going to be said.
Walk me through, what is a typical day for you when you're in Africa? How many countries you're visiting from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep? Walk me through briefly what your typical day is.
Sure, so I'll
Over the past 4 years.
Yeah, let's just start with Lake Chad Basin, because that's pretty simple. So I go to Nigeria first, and the first thing I do is I meet with the ambassador and country team. And they tell me what they're doing, they tell me what they think of what we're doing, and I make sure that I am on the same sheet of music with the ambassador before I head out and talk to any of my counterparts in the Nigerian military, right? And that's a full day of, in the embassy, just focused on that. And then from there, I go to my guys first, right? And I get the scoop from my guys, right? Because that's what makes me smart, right? The secret to success of a senior leader or general officer is to listen more than you do anything else, right? Because you are the least informed and the least knowledgeable, right? General Mattis told me when I came out on the one-star list, he was the commander of CENTCOM and he was visiting Afghanistan, and he, my commander at the time said, "Yeah, Don just came out on the list for a general officer." We're all very surprised, and I don't think anyone more than Don. But General Mattis said, "Well, let me give you some advice." He said, two things as a general officer. One is you're never going to hear the truth again, and two, you're never going to have a bad meal. And that's been done. So I said, "All right, sir, I got it." Now, I have had bad meals, and I would like to think that with my command approach, that I do get told the truth, and I think that's hugely important, so that I can work for my guys. Because I tell them, hey, if I don't know, I can't work for you. So that's a busy day, and then I go out day two, and I meet with all of our partners, and at the highest level, from the sometimes the Minister of Defense, Minister of Interior, And I'm usually with the ambassador when we do this, all the way down to the chief of defense. We talk about some of the gaps, some of the things we need to do, and then boom, get on the plane and we fly to Cameroon. And we do the same thing. And then we fly to Niger.
When you tell me you never have what Manus says advice, you won't have a bad meal. What happens? You have to be polite. You have the head of their military sitting across from you and your senior aides, and they're pushing across to you something that appears that's not edible, just not going to agree. How do you actually, I know you've been through all types of stuff, how do you take this down and not be rude?
I say, Captain Brown, come over here and taste this one. No, I kindly refuse to eat it.
Good.
I ask him, I say, so what is this? And I'm not eating the balls of anything.
Good.
So that's just the bottom line. I draw the line there, right? I don't care how much virility it's going to give me. I tell him, I've had 3 boys, I'm good.
Yeah, it's really good. On that note, when I have a couple of questions, please.
Yes, this was an excellent conversation, and Joe, your questions were terrific tonight. So my question to you, General, is in addition to understanding the tactics of war, working with your fellow military people, how do you prepare for working in the Islamic world? You have to study issues in terms of Islam, read the Quran, read Larry Wright, Lawrence Wright, or other people in terms of bringing yourself up to speed when it comes to understanding Islamic culture so that you can work within it.
Yes, sir. You have to educate yourself within the culture that you go into. In Africa, Muslims are a lot different and act a lot different than they do in the Middle East or they do in Afghanistan. And the women present themselves a lot differently. And you have everything in Africa from, the burqa all the way up to, very Western style dressed women. So what I do is, I get a read ahead from my cultural team inside my headquarters, so I know exactly who I'm going to be talking with. Because sometimes if you go to Nigeria, you got the Muslim North and the Christian South, and the military is mixed. I go to Mauritania, and they're French speaking. Some are Muslim, some are Christian, and you have to know, basically, who you're dealing with and where they come from. So it requires preparation. And I always tell my guys, one of our themes in SOC Africa is we are the sum of our preparation and our assessments. And if we do both of those right and we wrap them into the execution cycle, then we're going to do pretty good. And we're going to learn some lessons. And, being culturally astute, being respectful is half the battle. And they'll accept mistakes from you. As long as you are genuine, as long as you appear respectful and you're kind. And so, to answer your question, it requires preparation, and we take that very seriously. In Africa, you have Anglophones and Francophones that complicate it too, depending on who colonized them. So that creates some interesting social engagements as well.
Next question.
Yeah, fortunate to meet General Mattis and meet yourself on post-traumatic growth disorder, an antidote to
Right.
PTSD. What is your regimen to find the resilience to get through what you've got through? Spiritual, your workout regimen to get the biceps you got there, your sleep regimen. How do you monitor?
I have
you're
special
really-
things sewn into this uniform. It's a Spider-Man uniform.
Post-traumatic growth requires planning and daily resilience where we have combat against our own weaknesses. What are your secrets to make yourself that resilient man that grows like he describes in his articles, post-traumatic growth? An antidote to PTSD, where I give antidepressants as a doctor day in, day out.
So, you're absolutely correct about you have to come up with a daily plan. So what I've done as a commander, in order to ensure that I have the time that I need to think, the time that I need to decompress, is I have no organizational meetings prior to 9 o'clock, and I have none after 4 o'clock. And midday, I have 2 hours blocked off where I go home and I go out to my backyard and I have something to review, something to read, where I allow myself to think and I allow myself to decompress. And that can be 11 to 1 or 12 to 2. I tell my guys, you kind of figure that out, but I am staying religious to that. And I have to do that, because if I don't do that, then I'm not allowing my guys time, and I'm not allowing myself time to be able to reflect, decompress, and to manage the problems that post-traumatic stress, TBI, and pain management. So I followed my rehab regimen very closely. It was about 10,000 hours that I completed within 2 years, and I needed something else. So I do take medication, right? And I tell people I take medication to give me that little extra thing that I need, right? And it works out, very well. A lot of people think, people are like, oh, if I go on medication, then, I'm going to be, hugging trees and eating vegetables, right? And that doesn't happen to you, right? It doesn't happen to you. What it does is it allows you to be normal in an environment outside of combat. And that's why I went to combat a lot, because I felt very normal there. And there's a gentleman sitting next to you, my son, my oldest son, who bore the brunt of me being gone all the time, right? I mean, I wasn't around the entire 4 years he was in high school, right? And that wasn't fair to him. But I felt normal in a deployed environment where, my abnormalities in the way I acted personally and professionally were were not normal. And, back in garrison life. And it affected me personally and professionally in a
You were
negative
serving
way.
all of our sons as well. So
Yes,
you had to share it.
yeah.
But what's your spiritual regimen? Because you're dealing with a world that has to fight with warfare against
Right.
ideas.
Mhm.
And without those spiritual truths or sources that you have, you may not be able to win a war of ideas
Right.
with no weapon.
Right.
So an idea kills another idea sometimes better than a gun.
Well, that's right.
What's your spiritual strength?
My spiritual strength is remaining very grounded in my religion. So I keep the rosary with me all the time. I also have developed in every command that I've gone into a set of dog tags. And there are 3 Bible verses. One of them is Isaiah 6:8, right?
Sure.
I heard the voice of the Lord say, who shall we send? Who shall go for us? Here I am, send me. And that grounds me in selfless service and sacrifice, right? The next one is Psalms 133.1. Isn't it, how's it go now? Okay, give me a chance here. Okay. It is good and pleasing when brothers and sisters dwell as one. And that is a verse that I like to associate with being part of a larger team.
Sung in
and
every
working together.
synagogue, Hine Matovu Manayim.
Yes,
Every Friday night.
Yes. And then Psalms 144.1, which is, praise the Lord my God, who trains my hands for battle and my fingers for war. And that grounds me in mission. Mission, people, family. I say my prayers every day. The other thing that I have inside my office, I have nothing on the walls in my office. I have the pictures of my grandchildren, and that's it. But I have one special thing, and it's a glass case, and the glass case is full of 81 dog tags of the 81 service members that I was responsible for that lost their lives in combat. And I keep those in my office in the center of my conference table, which I don't use very much, but when I use it, it focuses people on what is very, very important. And those sacrifices that they made, the ultimate one, and their families made. And at the end of the day, we have to look at ourselves and say, you know, did we acquit ourselves with honor? Did we continue the mission? And that's the best way we can honor and respect them and their families. And so that's how I ground myself every
That
single
passage,
day.
no greater love than this, than a man lay down his life for another.
Exactly,
In your
sir.
case, you're laying down for strangers. I just lay it down for a family.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Please, the lady here. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Sir, I don't have a question. I just want to thank you and all the other service members in this room from the bottom of my heart for your devotion and commitment to all of us.
Okay, well.
Please, the gentleman, yes.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir.
Former Staff Sergeant James Fitzgerald, infantry from 101st, injured in Afghanistan as well. The question I have for you, what are we not doing currently as a country as a whole to connect the civilian populace to our military? I've been out in the Army for about 3.5 years now. You know, I was medically retired, so each and every single day that I walk around, I remember the 5 members of my platoon that I lost in Afghanistan, and trying to keep their memory alive, and also keep the memory alive of everyone else that's overseas right now. What can we do as a country that we're not currently doing to connect the country to the men and women that deploy overseas each and every single day?
You know, it really bothers me that a large portion of our society is very disconnected from what our service members are doing across the world in terms of you know, fighting violent extremist organizations. And that's a national dialogue. I think national leaders, state leaders, local leaders are going to have to take control of that, I think, and are going to have to be the ones responsible for ensuring that people understand every single day, you know, what's going on there. The news agencies are more interested in drama than they are in other things that are a lot more important. You know, I get asked 2 questions a lot from senior leaders all over the place, and that is, you know, why does SOF seem to be doing everything in Africa? And my answer to that is we're not, and I explain it in detail to them, because we're not. We're a small piece of a larger comprehensive effort. The second question I get asked is, why is Africa important? And I take people through threat, population, geography, history, and then I say, the last one is the most important. If we have one American, any place in the world, working to satisfy U.S. national objectives, then that is why any place in the world is important. One American, that's all it takes. We know we have a lot more than that, but that's my point. And I just don't think that that is something that is in the national dialogue, you know, at all. Special Operation Forces consider themselves quiet professionals, so we're not going to get up and tell everybody what we're doing. And we're not going to brag about ourselves, right? We get these forums, and I'm very honored to be here. To be honest with you, I feel very unqualified to be here given the people that you've interviewed that have sat in this seat, and I hope I'm doing them justice, but you know, that would be my answer, Staff Sergeant, to that. I want to thank you for your service, and I want to come and shake your hand, brother. Well, you know, I started here in this branch. Yeah, that's right. They call me a traitor in some circles.
Please. Yes, yes, you go.
Joel, a few moments ago, you were talking about your meeting with your counterparts in the Nigerian military. I'm sure you meet with your counterparts in other African militaries, and also maybe in some civilian administrative situations. And one of the realities, not only in Africa, is that some people are not totally forthcoming. You may have worked out a culture within your command of your soldiers telling you the truth, but I would be surprised if there were not some times where you're sitting next to, having a dialogue, trying to have a dialogue with your counterparts, and you know that they are not representing what is going on out there. I mean, what went on between the Nigerian military and its first efforts vis-a-vis Boko Haram. I mean, the whole world was told about that. And that's as much diplomacy, human relations as, and I don't know if that can be taught at West Point, but it's really, really difficult. And then on a particular area, Libya, with all the weapons that were in Gaddafi's armories that are now supplying all types of bad guys all over Africa and the world, and is there any way that can be controlled? I don't know, I'm not saying that's your job. I mean, it's almost like the world's job because it's fueling so much.
Well, yes, sir. So the proliferation of arms and the trafficking of people and the nexus of criminal activities and drugs, it's almost, it's almost unstoppable, right? And the best you can do is try and control it to a degree where it doesn't undermine your security and, doesn't create organized crime and stuff like that. So, that's a problem that I just don't see how it can be solved. And certainly the vast areas in which you have to cover in a place like Africa makes it almost impossible. You are absolutely right. I have sat across from a number of senior officers, partners, and I have known that what they're telling me is not exactly what's going on. I've also heard them tell their own press, hold their own press conferences. We're sitting there listening and we're going, well, that's not true. And we try to provide them with the advice and assistance to be truthful and to leverage their media in kind of the same way that we do. But it's very difficult. And it's a mindset that is going to take some time to get over. But you're absolutely right. We can't be caught not telling the truth, but they can be caught not telling the truth. And we know when that's happening. So we're not naive in that respect. And I got to tell you, there's a time and a place for us to talk about that, particularly when I'm sitting at dinner with my counterpart. And I've developed a great relationship with them. And I say, hey, I read in the paper, or I heard this. I mean, you and I both know. We both have soldiers on the ground doing the same thing. That's not what's happening. And they'll be perfectly honest with me in that particular environment. But
Is that a one-to-one, or
Yes.
are there a few other people around, or just the two of you?
no, there's usually my small team that consists of my command master chief and my political advisor, who is a person from the State Department that's assigned to SOC Africa. I couldn't tell you how invaluable that particular individual is to the organization in terms of communication and understanding and being able to communicate to civilians. He writes all of my post-meeting notes because he puts it in English and not in U.S. military terminology. And so it speaks to everybody, right? And that's hugely important. So, it's usually people that over time, they get very, very comfortable with us because we meet them on a bunch of venues. And our guys are out on the ground with them, and we help medevac their guys, and we provide medical support for them, we provide training for them. So there is a opportunity for, straight talk. But they can't do anything about what their national level leaders say publicly. They have to support that in the same way that we do.
General Bolduc, a lot of people have questions, but a lot of people just would like to thank you and shake your hand. Would it be possible for people to come up and just greet you and shake your hand and thank you.
Well, absolutely. I have, I'm well known for coming into a place and shaking everybody's hand inside the place. That was my first instinct to do that when I came in here this evening. But I realized that this isn't my show. And so I sat down in my seat.
But on that note, so ladies and gentlemen, if we could just be organized and also do the security and other stuff separately. General Bolduc, we'd just really like to thank you. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking General Bolduc for being so open, honest, and brilliant.
It is the very last Sock Africa coin I have in my possession, because I'm no longer the commander. But I would be honored if you would take this as a memory of our evening and our discussion.
Thank you very much, General.
Don't drop this on your
I would not.
God bless you all, and thank you.